Written by u/Carl 1961. People think I'm a serial killer. It's far worse than that. Part 12. When I got up the next morning, my eyes were still sore and red from the pepper spray that bitch had sprayed into them. The euphoric high I had been riding on the past few months was gone. I was shaken and disturbed by the events of the previous night. I thought about my botched hunt, the shadow face that had gotten away, and my near arrest. I had screwed up bad and now I dwelt upon the possible ramifications. I wasn't worried so much that the shadow face that had escaped would be able to identify me. The abandoned movie theater had been dark, and she had only caught a glimpse of me. I was frustrated that my impatience and carelessness had allowed my target to escape. I worried that the other shadow faces in the city would find out, maybe she'd report back to them or something, assuming these things had some kind of secret social network, and they'd realize for certain that there was indeed someone stalking their kind, if they hadn't figured that out already, and would become more alert, cautious, harder to track. Maybe they'd even start searching for me, hunting the one who was hunting them. I had been acting stupid, had gotten arrogant, and it had almost cost me my freedom, maybe even my life. I knew I couldn't risk being that sloppy ever again. The next time, I would be more on guard, more disciplined. I didn't realize it then, but there wouldn't be a next time. It was already too late. I went to work, irritable and sullen and withdrawn. My co-workers noticed my sudden change in mood, my silence and bloodshot eyes. One of the baggers who I had become friends with, Carrie, made a light-hearted joke about me partying too hard the night before, and I snapped and blew up at him right there at the front end of the supermarket, telling him to shut the fuck up and mind his own goddamn business. He looked at me in wide-eyed shock. All of my co-workers and their customers were looking at me, shocked by my sudden angry outburst, which was a far departure from the normally easygoing, amiable attitude they had gotten used to from me. My fellow cashier Nikki, who I had dated twice by then, was staring at me from her checkout lane with something like an expression of cautious fear, as if she was seeing a side of me she had never seen before, a side she had never even suspected existed. She looked at me as if I were a dangerous animal, a rabid dog that might suddenly attack. They all kept their distance from me the rest of the day, avoiding me. I didn't care. I was in no mood to apologize. I had too much trouble of my own to deal with. I left the supermarket when my shift ended that evening, not knowing that I would never see any of those people, my friends, ever again. When I got home, I cracked open a beer and turned the TV on. I watched it for about 30 seconds, then the beer I was holding fell from my hand and splashed out upon the floor, foaming and hissing. I felt gut punched. My knees buckled and I sat down heavily on my bed, staring at the screen in shock. My own face stared back at me. It was a police composite sketch of the triple-shot killer that had been preying upon the city's elite since last winter. An intended victim had managed to escape and given a description of the suspect who had been responsible for at least 5 murders and maybe as many as 12. They were apparently lumping in Jeremy's own killings with mine, having noticed similarities, unaware that there were 2 different killers preying upon the city's upper-class citizens. The likeness was dead on. That soul-sucking bitch might as well have given them a photograph of me. She'd even been able to provide them with my hair and eye color. I didn't know how she did it. She couldn't have seen my face for more than a second, and it had been dark. Then I remembered she wasn't human. Maybe these things have supernatural eyesight, or they can see in the dark. Who the fuck knows? I sat there for over an hour, letting the weight of it sink in. It was over. Truly and unquestionably over. Jeremy hadn't been there to bail my ass out like he had the first time. It was only a matter of time before someone who knew me, my coworkers or my neighbors who were familiar with me from seeing me around the apartment building, saw the sketch. My fellow employees would remember how irrational and erratic I had acted in the supermarket. They'd see the composite sketch and put 2 and 2 together. Then the police would come. Everything I had been building upon for the past year, the new life I had established, my friends and career, was gone, irrevocably lost. I thought about what I should do next, what my best options were. There was really only one thing I could do. I had to leave. To flee the city. Right now. I packed the duffel bag Dr. Steiner had given me when I left the hospital after my surgery with the few possessions I owned and left my apartment for the last time. I knew I would never return. I put my bag in the trunk of my car and got in the driver's seat. I drove away and parked in the underground garage of an office building across town. I sat there all night, wide awake, listening to the radio. They hadn't identified me, yet. I wanted to leave town, but I needed money, and the bank was closed. I would have to wait until they opened the next morning. It was risky, and I knew every minute I stayed in the city I was in danger of being apprehended, but it was a chance I had to take. I couldn't use my credit cards or my bank debit card. That night lasted forever. When 9 a.m. finally came around the next morning, I drove to my bank and withdrew the rest of the cash in my checking account. I was tense, expecting any second to hear a police officer shout at me, commanding me to put my hands in the air and get down on the ground. When I had my money, I got back in my car and drove out of the city, forever. As I crossed the bridge, I threw my revolver out the window, over the railing, into the river below. I drove north, for hours, without stopping. I listened to the radio. Police were close to confirming the identity of the killer who had been terrorizing the city for the past 5 months. They still hadn't released my name. I arrived in a different city I had never been to before, over 300 miles away. There I sold my car for cash at a used car dealership. After the transaction was complete, I walked down to a convenience store a couple blocks away and bought a pair of sunglasses. I went into the restroom, locked the door, removed my shaving kit from my duffel bag, and shaved my head at the sink. I made sure to throw all my hair in the trash and piled toilet paper over it. Then I put on the sunglasses. I used my phone to call a taxi, then threw my phone in the trash can outside, knowing the police could use it to track my location. I had the taxi drive me to the nearest bus station. I bought a ticket on a Greyhound for a city on the other side of the country I selected at random. I headed west.